Hello, everyone, and welcome to my January 2026 setup. I'm jumping right in with the January title, and as you can see, I don't have a calligraphy pen. So I just used a black fine liner and a black marker and did some faux calligraphy to achieve my desired look. For this setup, I decided on a sort of abstract art theme with leaves. It was a really easy yet impactful theme that can also be done by an art noob such as myself. I'm starting with the calendar spread because I generally shy away from cover pages because I prefer my planner to be mostly functional with decorative elements. So using my calendar spread as a quote-unquote cover page just makes the most sense to me. No hate to cover pages though, I love seeing other people set up beautiful cover pages. I just don't think I'm there yet in my bullet journaling journey. Now that the functional part of my calendar spread is done, I'm going in with my markers and adding these blobs all around the calendar, which is where the whole abstract art idea comes into play. Also, my calendar boxes are 5x5 docker spaces for anyone wondering. I didn't really have a set layout for the blobs when I started putting pen to paper. I kind of just went with my gut and placed said blobs in places that I thought would look good. I also tried to lean into the streakiness of the markers because I thought it gave more visual interest to the page and added to the whole abstractness of the theme. I'm quite a newbie when it comes to using markers in my journal just because where I'm from, stationery is really expensive and I didn't want to purchase anything unless I was definitely going to use it. But luckily for me, I was gifted a few sets of water-based markers over Christmas, and those are the ones I was using for the setup. Although, in all honesty, they're not the greatest markers, so I would not recommend them to anyone, but they did get the job done. The color palette I chose was gray and blue. I'm generally not a bright color person in everyday life, and especially not in my journal, but I really liked how the gray and blue looked together, so I might look into using more vibrant colors in my journal in the future. Now, I'm just going in with my black fine liner and adding in the most basic leaf doodles. Then I'm going to go over every line I've drawn, but I'm intentionally not going to follow the line exactly. I'm doing this because I want the leaves to look like sketches. I want them to look as unrealistic as possible. I got this idea from the amazing Anna Bronze. Oh, I hope I'm not butchering your surname, I'm so sorry. She's on YouTube and she did something similar with some flower doodles in one of her themes, and I thought it was a great way for someone to add some drawings and some artwork to their spreads, especially when they're new to doodling and drawing. It was really minimal effort but with maximum results. And with that, the calendar/cover page is done, and we can move on to the next spread. For my next spreads, I will be combining my goals and habits pages. Again, I'm just going in with that black fine liner and doing a cursive font. Then I'm going to go over all of the downstrokes with a black marker. Going over the downstrokes is what gives the font this kind of faux calligraphy look. I decided to combine my goals and habits pages this year because almost all of my goals are habit-based, and it just made sense to me to have them on the same spread so I could have a visual representation of how my habits were impacting my goals. In the top right-hand corner, I've got a table with 2 columns for my goals that are outside the spectrum of my habits and for their action steps, because a goal without a plan is just wishful thinking. And on the bottom, I've got another table for all my habits. I decided to go for a table layout for my habits because drawing out a bunch of tiny calendars just seemed like way too much work. When I set up my monthly spreads, I like to start my month on a Monday. So, whichever month has the most days in the week, I add that week to the month. So, for example, I prefer to start my weeks on a Monday, and January 1st this year was a Thursday. So, more of January's days were in the week. So, the last few days of December were added to my January spread, which basically meant my whole year started on December 29th. If that makes sense. I really hope that makes sense. Now again, I'm just adding those blobs and leaf doodles. And for this spread, I made the blobs and doodles a lot bigger because I had a lot of white space, which meant that I had more space for decorations. I personally have always been a functional parts first and decorative parts later kind of girly when it comes to my planner, but luckily for me, this spread had a lot of space for decorations, so I could just go ahead and have fun with my theme. And now for my last spread in the setup, I have my first weekly for 2026. My weeklies are basically where I live. They're where I do most of my planning in my journal, and they're where I spend most of my time. Right now, what I'm creating is essentially a weekly dashboard, because there are certain things like my tasks, my routines, and my water intake that I prefer to track on a weekly basis as opposed to a monthly basis. Purely because I know that if I track those things on a weekly basis, I am more inclined to actually fill them in than if they were on a separate monthly spread of their own. Now, even though I'm calling this a weekly spread, it's more of a weekly dashboard combined with dailies because I use what some people call a rolling weekly. So what that means is I don't have a set space for each day. As I fill out my journal daily and one day ends, I just add the next day right under it. And I found this method really works for me because I don't feel confined to using a set amount of space per day. Because in reality, we're human. We're not doing the same amount of work every day. And this type of layout just gives me the freedom to do as much or as little planning as I need to do without worrying about space constraints. With that, my last spread is done and we can move on over to the flip through. I am really happy with how this setup turned out. It was easy to set up and it was really minimal, but it looks so visually interesting and it kind of makes me want to start planning immediately. It was also so different to what I normally do in my planner, so I'm excited to try out some more new and interesting things in the future. I really hope you enjoyed this plan with me, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye friends, happy planning!